Hi. Welcome to Movie Plots. Spoilers ahead. On a full moon night in Paris, a doctor emerges from the sewers beneath the street and runs through a courtyard toward help. Before he can receive any, something bursts from a grate in the ground, knocking him down and dragging him back under. We meet American tourist Andy McDermott, who is traveling Europe with his friends Brad and Chris on a daredevil tour, racking up points doing dangerous acts. Andy assures the doubters that Paris is where they will see his greatest stunt. When the Eiffel Tower closes up for the night, the three break in, climbing all the way to the top with their bungee jumping gear, making it just before the lights go out. As Andy prepares to make a jump, they are interrupted by someone approaching, a depressed woman named Seraphine Piggott, who begins to attempt a non-bungee jump. No! When Andy's attempt to talk her down fails, he goes over after her. Brad and Chris barely save Andy's life, as he executes a mid-air rescue of Seraphine, but receives a concussion in the process. While recovering in the hospital, Andy mentions to the two that the girl had a possible suicide note that she dropped, so his friends go looking. Finding out her address from the letter, Andy goes to Seraphine's home using her shoe as an excuse, and leaves with a date. Chris gets Andy ready, and while playing it cool on his date, Andy manages to almost get himself killed, before Seraphine shows her strength by saving him. After she flees, the three go back to her house to find her but come across Claude, who tells them he looks after her, and invites them all to a full moon party, where the bouncer happily lets anyone walk in off the street. Not finding Seraphine amongst the rabble, Chris goes back to the house to look for her, finding her locked in a cage but not wanting to leave.
What are you doing?
When she hears that Andy has gone to Claude's party tonight, she knocks out Chris, locking him in the cage and rushing over to the club. While Claude and his boys have a group huddle, Seraphine takes Andy and leads him out of the club through a tunnel, being pursued by Claude. Seraphine tells Andy to go the rest of the way on his own, and starts to yell at him to run as she changes. A full view transformation into a werewolf happens for Seraphine and all of Claude's friends, before they start ripping the partygoers to shreds, having aimed to invite tourists specifically to feast on them. Chris uses his clothes to escape from the cell, and looks around to find a werewolf. Though strapped to a bed and missing its legs, it can only drag itself after Chris until he escapes. Brad went looking for Andy before the full moon came out. Unaware of what is going on, he soon realizes. Andy then has his first encounter with a werewolf. One begins to chase him through the tunnels, but he pierces it with a metal bar and escapes out of a drain pipe, only sustaining a bite. Andy awakens in the morning to Seraphine blending human hearts into a smoothie, and allows him to feel her breasts to calm him down. She begins to tell him the whole story, that he is turning into a werewolf and will go through changes. The two are then interrupted by Seraphine's mother's ghost, who freaks Andy out enough for him to leap out a window and flee. Chris tries to get his attention, but Claude holds his hand over his mouth and kidnaps him. Detective Ben begins to keep an eye on Andy, as he starts to go through his changes. When an American tourist named Amy enters the restaurant, Andy begins to get turned on by her animal print, and has a canine episode. The two have dinner together, and begin flirt eating with each other. The ghost of Brad shows up and freaks Andy out, and Brad begins to break down Andy's werewolf condition. For Andy to become normal again, he must eat the heart of the werewolf that bit him. And for Brad's ghost to be at peace, the werewolf that killed him must die. Andy ignores these warnings from Brad, and continues his date with Amy, going into a cemetery and getting busy on a grave, all while Ben watches. While inside, he begins to have his first transformation, his body heating up and forcing him to jump into a fountain for relief. When Amy finds Andy, he is completely changed, and despite Ben's attempt to save her, Amy is killed, along with Ben. Andy is taken into custody by Inspector Leduc and made to identify Amy, before her ghost also shows up to torment Andy, since she now needs him to die for her to be set free. Brad tries to keep him alive since he needs him to kill the werewolf who bit him. Brad tells Andy he has to eat Seraphine's heart to remove his curse.
Andy, look out!
And Amy tries to walk him in front of a bus. Claude and his goons kidnap Andy and take him to a church, trying to convince him to join them, and to prove his loyalty, kill Chris. Andy refuses, and before Claude can kill him, Seraphine shows up and saves him. They arrive back at her house where she tells Andy that her stepfather made a cure, but it caused the werewolves to instantly change instead of needing a full moon. When the doctor tested it on Amy, she turned, killing her mother and mauling her stepfather. Before any funny business can take place, Claude and the werewolves show up at the house, but Andy escapes out the back. He sneaks back into the house later to find Amy's stepfather dead at the hands of Claude, who also took the remaining drugs. Taunting Andy with his next move, Claude holds a party with all the Americans he can find under one roof, to which Andy sneaks in. Before Andy can convince the party to exit the building, he is arrested by LeDuc and his men, but the bouncer seals the door shut, trapping the police inside. The Wolf gang all emerge in robes, and Claude begins to play to the American crowd, as they all start to inject themselves with the bottled moonlight. Still not convinced, the police begin to handcuff themselves to the lawbreakers, before they all begin to change and burst out of their robes. Seraphine drops a gargoyle on the bouncer's head, and frees the trapped partygoers as police backup arrives, with Chris somehow managing to survive the whole ordeal. Andy shoots one of the werewolves dead, and as he turns back human they realize he was the one who ate Brad's heart, which sets him free. The chief of police just blames the situation on drugs, before quickly being eaten. Andy and Seraphine pursue the werewolves into the catacombs, but when Seraphine runs out of bullets, she induces a transformation. Seraphine then proceeds to kill the last one of Claude's men, with Andy shooting the victor not realizing that it's her. Not being able to eat her heart, he is chased away by the police. Andy looks for the final werewolf Claude, but he soon slips and falls onto a subway track, and when Claude descends down after him he gets cleaned up by a passing train. Claude survives, and kills the driver and a lady before finally his serum wears off, and he reverts back to human. He tries to take another dose of the drug, but Andy manages to stop him. During their fight, Andy confirms that Claude is the werewolf who bit him, and while wrestling over the syringe, he falls onto it. Claude knows what's up, and begins to get run down by a transforming Andy, who kills him and eats his heart. The sedative which was thought to be the cure triggered the change, and in the back of the ambulance Seraphine discovers adrenaline has the opposite effect. Andy and Seraphine get married with Chris as their best man, and the couple control the curse with adrenaline-fueled activities. And the movie ends. An American Werewolf in Paris is a 1997 comedy horror film directed by Anthony Waller. The film was billed as a sequel to An American Werewolf in London that was released 16 years prior. Though the only similarities the two share is an American in Europe meets a werewolf. An inspiration for the werewolves' design and movements was based on lions and how muscular they are compared to wolves. While Tom Everett Scott did all his own stunts, Julie Delpy stated that the only reason she made the film was to pay her rent.
Oh! You're dead! I saw them pull you out of the canal!
Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.
Stop them! I didn't say shoot them.